Okay, so this is a quick example of how the game is played using a vassal log that I played against somebody. And we'll go through the sequence of play. The first thing is the leaders are removed from the game and put off to the side, and they can be re-entered into the game and added on later on to add on to specific areas where you want strength. The army panic check happens. There's nothing to happen yet. It's the first turn of the game, so nobody's injured. You receive your command points, so you kind of you do a die roll, and then you add your leaders to figure out what your command action points are. So the red player has 5, the blue player has 2. Now the red player, if he wants to buy, either player can, but if either player wants to buy the initiative for the round, he can spend 1 command action point before his die roll to add on to his die roll. And so, say if the red player wanted it, he could go down to 4, and then add on to get that initiative. Okay, so now we get into the activation part of the game. You take those action points, as shown on the other screen, and you say, I'm going to activate a unit. So he's going to bring in his reinforcements, which are brought in from any map edge, and he's going to bring them in from the back here to try to attack the heavy archers from behind and get a good position on me. As they come in, they spend 1 extra movement point to just come onto the board, and if they don't come in contact with the enemy, they can actually use double movement points. But since he is coming in contact, he can only use his base of 5, -1, which is 4. After all those units are used, they are marked with the yellow marker. And now it's the red player's turn. Red player activates a group as a formation using his leader as the central point. All of his units are facing the same way, so he can do that. He used his movement points on the heavy archer here to turn the unit around, and then all those units are used. Now it's the red player's turn. He's got action points left, but the only thing he's got left to do is the WW. Now all the units are marked with a yellow marker, and they are done as far as activation goes, and nobody can do anything else. So now they go into melee. So the way melee works is you designate an attacking unit, and then you designate, which is the 1, and then you designate the defending unit. And then if the unit is capable of doing a retreat before combat, it can do that. You calculate the base strength value by rolling a die. You add the ratio advantage, which is the strength times the multiplier, and the terrain, which there's none in this scenario. Then the attack vector is the distance from which you come from. Then you get the final value, and then you compare the final values to the chart. And if the attacker is 3 times the enemy's defensive value, defender's eliminated. If the attacker is twice the defender's value, then the attacker is disrupted. And if it's equal to or less than 2 times the attacking value, then it's an exchange. Both units are flipped to disrupted, and on down the line. That's how melee works. That's probably the toughest part of the game, is to figure it out, but it all kind of makes sense. You look at the strength of the leaders who are with them. You look at the strengths of the units and the direction that you're attacking. That's pretty much it. So we did an attack there, and the heavy archer was disrupted. It looks like an exchange. The heavy cavalry was also disrupted. Now we have the heavy infantry versus the heavy cavalry. Heavy cavalry decides to retreat instead of fighting. So as each melee occurs, the red dots are in place to mark that unit is no longer eligible for melee attacks. And then we move on to turn 2. And I added those 1, 2, 3, 4 markers to the vassal module just to help keep track of certain things we were talking about in the game. We were playing this by email. So all those units have moved. And when we get to the end of this turn, I'm going to talk about like formations and how the leaders can add on to where they can attack and stuff. So his heavy cavalry there in the center is in serious trouble. He's gone. Okay, so first the leaders come off the board, and you try to decide where would the leader be most effective to help you in your situation. He's got different groups around the board. They're facing different directions. So you can see these guys are not facing the same direction, so that's not going to be much help as far as doing a group activation there. These two guys are okay. These two guys are okay. This guy's off by himself. So depending on where he wants his strength, he's got a real tough time of coming at me. His formations are really broken up. Now I'm disorganized, and none of my units are facing the same direction, so I really don't have much good there either. So this time the red player has 6 action points, and the blue player has 4 action points. Looks like I did an illegal move there since they all weren't facing the same direction. But this was one of our earlier games. So you can get the idea of the game, how the movement, the rally, you can actually spend a command action point to rally a single unit automatically, or you can rally a whole group with a leader. Say if I had some disrupted units here, I can roll on the rally table and see which units come back, or I can automatically rally one individual unit. So in review, the game works by the first thing that happens are leaders removed from the game. Army panic check. See if your army is below its panic level, and if it does, army panic happens. You receive your command points, separate roll on the command table for each player, plus the command points from the leaders. You determine the initiative. One player can pay 1 CP to gain initiative from the opponent until an opponent passes, and then you place your leaders onto the board, alternating, placing one leader with any combat unit on their own side. And there's also something called command control that can happen. If you lose command control, you basically have to roll for that. If you don't pass that effect, all of the units basically rush towards the enemy. This scenario actually does have the command control in it. The activation round happens where each player, the initiative player, decides to go first, who goes first, and then you alternate spending 1 CP to either activate a unit for moving, firing, rallying, or you can just pass. After the activation, each unit is marked with a yellow marker, or red if the unit attacked using a ranged weapon. Movement. You can order a formation to move. All units within that formation must start facing the same direction. They must move a number of hexes specified by its movement allowance. It may freely rotate one hex side before and after leaving a hex. It cannot move through enemy units. It can move through friendly units. Once a unit's moved, it's marked with a yellow marker. A combat unit may exit the map by spending 1 MP to the map edge to move beyond the map edge. Now, it does not give you decrease your panic rating, but it does reduce your firepower. Reinforcements can enter the map as a formation even with no leader with 1 CP to activate. They can move up to twice their normal movement allowance for the turn they enter, and they don't end up next to, as long as they don't end up next to an enemy unit. To be eligible for firing, a unit must have a missile rating and a range value. and be within that range, and line of sight cannot be blocked. Some units can fire twice if they have the 2 arrows on them versus 1. You can use your command action point turn to rally. You can automatically flip a unit from disorder to good by rallying, or you can go for a group rally, which you roll a die and check the rally table. The melee combat, you designate an attacking unit, select a defending unit. You can retreat before combat, calculate your strength values, and then apply to the table that we talked about. And then that's the turn. Now the victory conditions. Evaluated at the game end. You get 1 VP for causing the enemy army to panic. 1 VP for eliminating the enemy camp or war wagon. 1 VP for having at least twice the value of the current strength combat values remaining on the battlefield as the opponent, except for camps and war wagon. And then add specific scenario VPs. Lots of combat units, some great scenarios here. Like I said, there's 8 in here from all different eras, and you can see the 8 there. And then there's 4 or 5 different scenarios. There are quite a few unit types, and some unit types have certain advantages. You can see that the green 3 allows him to move through his own units, I believe. The +2 is a +2 against cavalry. Ranged attack, you fire twice with that. He has a range of 3, so that's a great unit to have there. Your cavalry. So lots of units in the game, lots of flexibility. The leaders add a lot to the game as far as your firepower and combat value. Take a look, if you get a chance, if you look at the rule set, mainly look at the combat on the melee table. That's probably the toughest part to figure out of the game, but once you understand how it's calculated, you'll look at the board and say, well, that makes sense because this guy's stronger, he's attacking from this direction, he's got a leader with him. It's just a little bit to work through, but overall, the game is simple with some heavier mechanics to some deeper war games. I hope you enjoyed the review and watching the game, and take care.